Hi, a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and parents. And thank you for the warm welcome. And thanks for this opportunity to bring across some parenting tips and courtesy of Promises Healthcare. And I'm going to share with you a few research-based or evidence-based parenting tips, and that comes from Triple P. Now, Triple P stands for Positive Parenting Program. It is from the University of Queensland in Australia, and it is also something not uncommon in Singapore and around the countries in Asia and some of the western part of the world. Triple P is run by the Ministry of Social and Family in schools through some of the agencies that are situated closer to the geographical boundaries of the schools. So you can look in to where the Triple P is being programmed and delivered through your schools and get more information. Now, let me get started with talking to you about parenting. Parenting is something that needs constant revisiting and modifications in order to fine-tune your parenting skills. It is not to say that you sit with the old school of doing parenting. That may not be something that will fit well with your children. So then, therefore, there would be a lot of problems that can happen, conflicts, and then there, as a result, disconnection between children and parent. Um, so we are trying to see how effective this area can be managed. The whole idea or the research part of parenting that I'm going to talk to you in the 4 tips that I'll be sharing in a while talks about not trying to fix the tip of the iceberg or the child's behavior, but rather try to attend to the parenting modification, and through that to see how the child's behavior can be changed, the problem concerned behavior can be changed, and also where the parent's stress can be reduced. So have this at the back of your mind. And would you please tell your partner who is seated beside you, your spouse, uh, look at the person and tell the person, I'm glad that we can sit for a family session together. Now, if your spouse is not around and if you're alone, please pat on your back and say, well done, because parenting is not an easy journey. Okay, let's look at the presentation. According to the Psychotherapy Networker, it is said that the real power of family work is how family members, especially parents, can learn that they already have the inner resources to repair rifts. Now, if rifts are not repaired, that's when family goes through breakdown or breakup or fractures in the family. It is also something that we got to understand, that children don't have the inner sense of how to love and be loved. They rely on an adult who provides safety, attunement, to be able to understand things, to empathize, acceptance, and also boundaries that bring safety for children, for families, for communities, and boundaries are essential as well. They need dinner table conversations, bedtime stories, rules, consequences, and cuddles on porch swings. I know most of you do most of this stuff, and there are certain things that you can add to your parenting kit. Some of the tips that I'll be sharing with you today, you may think that, oh, I know this. Then you got to continue doing it. And some of it will be new, and how it is being administered too. That's when you're going to fine tune your parenting. But be consistent, and you have to be predictable in your parenting. Tip number 1 is to develop good relationships. Now, this is important because relationship takes precedence over all other parenting strategies. So what does this mean? It is to spend time with your child by doing things that the child would like you to sit and do. So examples could be such as helping out with a chore, um, sitting with the child when the child is doing some homework, and sometimes watching TV, just sitting beside your child. It could be any age of the child. Sometimes playing things that the child likes to play with, and then bedtime. That is spending time. Talking with your child is an important part as well. Now, talking is not giving advice and going into more of giving lectures. Now, that is something that happens with all of us. Parents, we don't have time to listen. We tend to be giving lectures. I don't know how we have time to give lectures, but we find it very difficult, very challenging to listen. And what children would want nowadays is to listen, why they become close to friends, why they become close to other channels and social media, because there is a huge platform of listeners there. And they may not be necessarily helpful, but there is a huge group of listeners. So why can't we bring it back into our own homes, into our families? So talking with your child may allow them to express themselves, also to listen to their new ideas rather than running them down on their ideas, and talking about interesting stuff. Not that happens only to parents, but also with the children. What are some interesting things that happen with the children? And sharing your own ideas as well. Showing affection is very important, and that is a way that we can build trust both ways, in the child, also in the parent. So where the child builds trust in the parent, and the parent can build trust in the child. So affection is very important, and affection, I believe most of you have very different ways of showing affection. So tell me a little bit about how you show affection to your child. So the chat box is on, and I can look at the chat box. You can put down some of your answers there. Come on, parents. How do you show affection to your children? You all do this, just that I want to know what you do. Yes, hugs. What are the things? Yeah, spending time with them, bringing them food, good food. All right. Giving words of encouragement. Yes, yes. One more. Yes. Oh, there is a lot. Playing with them, listening to their stories, affirming them. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for that interaction. So these are many ways that we show affection. And why do we need to show affection to our children? That is because they feel approved as a person. So that is very important, because identity is something that we want to build in the child. You can't build yourself in the child or the person you want the child to become. The child has to be able to take initiative and work towards crafting his or her identity. And these ways help them. And it is a very powerful way to show that the child is approved of his or her personhood when you show affection. So a handshake, giving a high five, these are small ways of also showing affection. Tip number 2, encouraging good behavior. Again, parents go into this escalation of encouraging by giving. They think that they are encouraging, but it actually doesn't encourage, and then you get stuck in the journey of parenting. We want the children to behave well, but why are children behaving in ways that are not helpful sometimes? So then there is a problem. When we backtrack, there is a problem with the way that parenting is being administered too. So praising our child, your children, is very important. Now, there is a old school of thought that says don't praise your child because the child will become proud. Now, that is sadly not research, but what the research would say is use descriptive praise. So it has to be genuine, and it has to be able to describe the praise for the child. And so an example would be like, John, I really am glad that you were able to finish your homework and help your dad do some stuff. So it's very descriptive. Now, very negative praise is, oh, John, I'm glad that you finished your homework without any complaint. Or rather than complaining like before. So this is mixed signals for the child, but when you give a praise, we are going to make it very clear and we are going to be specific with the praise. And that is so that the child in his brain is able to register affection and attention with desirable behavior. Let me repeat that the child in the brain, no matter the child is primary schooler or teenager, is able to register attention is something that everybody wants with a desirable behavior. And that happens only when the parent is able to give a descriptive praise. So another area would be having interesting activities. Now, what are some interesting activities? You will see later how Eric and his daughter would perform, and they are going to perform some interesting activity, what the child is interested in. And we were saying, wow, that comes quite naturally for the child. So there are lots of interesting activities based on the multiple intelligences that the child would possess. So study your intelligence of your child. It is not so much only doing academics and tuition and added tuition classes and other extracurricular activities. Now, they are important, but you have to understand your child's intelligence part and nurture that, because that is when the child develops a sense of contentment with who she or he is as a person growing into teenage years and thereafter young adulthood and adulthood years. We have lots of people who are not happy with who they are. They are doing things that they are not happy about. So that is when parenting has to come in very effectively and recognizing what they could do differently. Tip 3 is teaching new skills and behaviors. So what are some new skills? So we use the mode of being a good role model rather than telling the child, okay, look at that cousin of yours. He behaves this way. Why can't you behave this way? He scored so many marks. Why can't you do it that way? Oh, she plays the piano very well. Why can't you do it that way? So this is not role modeling. Role modeling is where you role model effective behaviors that you want the child again to know that he or she can follow after you. Now, children not necessarily will copy all the behaviors that they see. They will definitely copy the behaviors that they are internalized when they are at home. So, parents, you got to be able to do your conflicts carefully. You got to be able to communicate with respect towards each other. You got to show love. Sometimes, some homes, the rule is we only show love to the child. But it is very difficult to find the role modeling of love between both parents. So children learn to love when they see their parents love each other as well. So being a good role model is very important inside the house and as well outside the house. Outside the house, it's very easy to be a good role model. Most people struggle being a good role model inside the house. And face your challenges and fears and learn from your mistakes. We all do mistakes. What if we do mistakes? Well, we can tell our children, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And I'm sorry about that. That should have not happened. And please forgive me. So that kind of forgiveness has to come into the picture as well, which is very important. Using incidental teaching. There is a lot of information that is out there every second, less than a second. So we can get to know anything around the world that happens. And we can use what we observe on television, on social media, on in the newspaper, and we can use these stories, these informations to talk to our children. Of course, we don't use this again as a lecture. but we try to use it in a way where the child engages more and the child is able to listen and hear and give answers. So the parent would take the role of asking questions. So something like, I wonder what happened to this father, why he murdered his two sons. Now, sometimes as parents, we think, oh my goodness, we don't talk about these things. These are horrible things. You wouldn't know that your child is already viewing pictures that are quite brutal on the social media. So, what stops you from talking and using these incidents to bring across valuable lessons to our children? If the home is not an avenue to learn this, then that is when the child will go constantly into social media and all other avenues, because their brains are curious and they want to learn things with the whole new culture of technology and the improvement of technology. And we cannot stop that. Right, so that is about teaching new skills and behavior. Make home your teaching ground first. Managing misbehavior. This is something unavoidable. Children will misbehave, and that is normal part of their behavior. Now, if they don't misbehave, I would say that there is a problem. There is some abnormal sense of development. So children will misbehave. Now, there is a spectrum of what kind of misbehavior we are talking here. We're not talking about, behaviors where mental health issues are at the background, but we're talking about certain normal misbehaviors. What would be some misbehaviors parents you struggle with? Come, you can tell me what are some misbehaviors that you're struggling with your teens. Give you about 1 or 2 minutes. Oh, you got a long list. I know that. Not telling the truth. All right. Yeah, it's very difficult then to be able to trust the child when the truth is not spoken. It is part of the commitment as well. So parents, you got to be transparent with the children as well. Being stubborn, right? Being stubborn is very much a very normal behavior with their development. Not listening to instructions. Yes. That's just like my 5-year-old. All right. Yes. Being playful and not loving to study. Rude. Yes. We wonder sometimes, where does this child learn to be rude? Who is teaching this child to be rude? So we wonder, is it the social media? Is it the movies that they watch? Or is it their friends? Is it the peer pressure? Or is it the home by itself? Most children, according to research, learn to be rude when they don't feel respected in their own homes. And these are real problems. Parents, I am with you on this. Cannot sit still. Oh, really? All right. Okay. Let's go into the last tip that I have for you. Yes, some of them will jump. They can be hyperactive and wanting to do other stuff as well. But we got to understand that the misbehavior falls into a category of bringing in consequences, which I will touch on when the behavior needs a modification in the child. So let's see what are some of the tips. So setting clear ground rules is important. Sometimes children don't know what are the rules. So if you want the child to stop jumping on the sofa or concentrate on his studies, you have to be very clear. Have 2 to 3 rules for one behavioral modification. You don't have 10 rules, but 2 to 3 rules, which has to be stated positively. So sit down at your desk and you study from what time to what time, and this time you are able to move and go and play, so that the rules can be very clear and the child has to be able to understand them. Now, if there are no clear rules, then the child also misbehaves. Logical consequences is when the rule is not followed through. So then you have to impose some logical consequence. So if the child is using the screen timing, say for instance, you've given the child 1.5 hours to use the screen, but the child is using the screen for 2 hours, that's when you have to think what would be a logical consequence. So the consequence, what we would suggest is in that occurrence is maybe the child doesn't get 2 days to use the screen. Now you can't say for the rest of the week you're not going to use the screen. So the child will have then to think of very deceptive ways to manage his own needs. So you have to be realistic when you bring in logical consequences. And the final one is a directed discussion, followed by another one as well. A directed discussion is when you see that the child is not agreeable with what you are saying, with your instructions, and the child is not complying. Then you sit the child, not in front of everybody, not at the dinner table, not when the extended family is around, but take the child to another side where the child is alone. Every child feels scared when there is shame. So we don't expose the child to shame, unnecessary shame, just because the child is showing misbehavior. We put the child aside and we talk to the child in a calm tone, asking the child what happened and what he could do to change. The child jolly well knows what is the desirable behavior. So you don't have to tell the child what to do, but you got to remind the child, ask the child, what were you told to do, and what do you think you can do now? And again, don't take the directed discussion for more than 5 to 7 minutes. Planned ignoring is when the child throws a tantrum. Now, this can happen with younger children or with children who are teenagers. They might say, no, I don't want to do that. You are rude, you are harsh. How can you do this kind of thing? You are the cruelest person in the world. You just ignore. You don't have to bang doors, but you just ignore and you're not going to say anything. And why ignoring is important? Because that's the only way to de-escalate a conflict. You don't have to escalate with children. There are children who start throwing things at their parents. Some children even slapping their parents over conflicts, and that is because there is a conflict escalation. With that, we come to the end of the hot tips on parenting.